Cancelling old TV shows and movies. Is it helping to fight racism? Recently, the Black Lives Matter movement prompted streaming services around the world to pull down some of their content because it was seen as having racist themes, racist language, or offensive depictions of black people or other minority communities. And just a heads up, we'll be showing some of that content to help explain things. So what's been cancelled?
Oh yes, you is.
The list includes movies like Gone with the Wind and Tropic Thunder, episodes from a bunch of TV shows like Little Britain, Fawlty Towers, Community, and 4 of Australian comedian Chris Lilley's shows. When it comes to the use of blackface, it might seem obvious why some people are all for taking it down. Most people agree that blackface is just really offensive because it stems from a history of mocking, enslaving, and persecuting black and brown people. But what might seem less obvious is the argument that some of the content is pushing forward racist stereotypes, which can be really harmful in a world where racism is still a big issue.
To kind of have these stereotypes, which are quite frankly racist and degrade minorities, kids are seeing that and thinking that it's okay.
When I joined the ABC in late 2013, Jonah from Tonga, the 6-part Jonah from Tonga series, I oversaw its post-production. Half the community that engaged with the ABC loved the show and, found it hilarious and loved him. But there was probably an equal number of members of the Pacifica community in Australia who were very concerned about that show, and they felt that it was, take your pick. They felt that it was brown-faced, they felt that it was appropriation, and they felt that it poorly represented their culture, particularly they thought it trotted out cliches that every Tongan kid was a naughty kid, was a rat bag.
Will he survive to the end of year 12? I doubt it.
And it was something that went right to the top. Even the managing director of the ABC at the time was aware that this was an issue.
Just so you know, the ABC is now looking more closely at its programs to see what might be considered harmful or offensive to its audience. But when you really think about comedy, the question of whether old content should come down or not becomes even more complicated. I mean, it's meant to be funny.
I know Chris very well. Chris and I started on the same TV show together in 2002 or 3. He's not a racist, he's not a bigot. He would say, I think, that he's simply reflecting a range of, characters that one finds in the community. But of course, people are perfectly entitled to be concerned about something, even if the person making the art had no intention to cause offence.
There are a couple of POCs that are like, hey, I'm from this background and I found it funny, that's fine, it's just a comedy. But in saying that, I don't think they can speak on behalf of their entire community. Something that might be fine for me may not be fine for another Indian person.
I'm sure there are plenty of things I felt were funny at the time and now would look at in 2020 and think are horrendous. The difference is, though, I think that what we need to do as a people is move forward and grow and learn about what our mistakes were and hopefully be better tomorrow.
The intention of comedy isn't always to laugh with a character, though. It can be to laugh at that character and their questionable behaviour to make a point.
Hey, Neil, this is gonna be awesome, yo.
So we just gonna ignore that hate crime, huh?
That's a big part of satire.
And why am I in this movie? Maybe I just knew I had to represent. Because they had one good part in here for a black man, they gave it to Crocodile Dundee.
I feel like everything has to be on the table in art and in comedy. It comes to the point of the artist who does want to use the N-word. It's up to the artist on how they do that and the level of intelligence and the depth of the content and the art. But what they need to understand is that's a very loaded word and it can be weaponized really easily.
With some limits, it's okay. I think, for example, it was probably a mistake for that particular episode of Fawlty Towers to be taken down because the character of the Major in the episode about the Germans used the N-word. The point of that episode was actually that the Major is a terrible racist, not that racism is okay.
Well, you've got to love them, I suppose, haven't you? Germans? No, women. I hate Germans.
But not everyone agrees that because something is satire or a statement against racism, that it gives you a free pass to use racist language or imagery.
The biker's gonna stop that right now. This is worse than when you wore your shorts to work.
You realize this is incredibly offensive.
Yes. For example, Tina Fey, who used blackface in a satirical way in her show 30 Rock, has asked for those episodes to be pulled from streaming services. And Scrubs creator Bill Lawrence has asked for episodes of his show to be pulled down as well. But some people reckon taking down content, voluntarily or otherwise, is kind of like trying to cancel history, or at least edit history.
But my deep sense is that to erase things or to somehow kind of put a barrier on it to access is not helping us.
Sir, I'm asking you as a human being to please stop talking like that.
You're potentially adopting a methodology that says, I'm in disagreement and therefore I don't feel that there's a need to enter into any kind of discussion.
We don't want to just completely remove it and not acknowledge that it happened, because that's just saying all these experiences, all this oppression, all this like racism that people experience didn't exist. Gone with the Wind, for example, that's a movie that has so much cultural significance because it does have Hattie McDaniel.
Just in case you don't know, Hattie McDaniel, aka Mammy, the slave character, was the first black person ever to win an Academy Award.
I shall always be a credit to my race and to the motion picture industry.
So I think in that sort of case, it's really important to acknowledge the racial depictions in that, but also the progress and how far we've come from that.
But there's also the question of where do we stop? I mean, if we really start looking at representations of racism, sexism, homophobia on our screens, we'd probably have to cancel a lot of things made any time before the past decade.
Hey, honey, what is for dinner?
Are you gay?
I get that a lot doing what I do.
If we start taking things down, do we start asking questions in that critical way about so much that's currently still up?
That's weird. I just wouldn't pay you for mechanical.
Keep ringing my bell!
Man talk.
I think we can also treat people with, respect and assume that they are in a position, adults particularly, to make a decision about whether they themselves want to continue to watch things that they think are inappropriate or they find offensive, and if they don't like them, they don't have to watch them.
Some people are also worried about the threat of censorship and where controlling what people can and can't watch could take us.
I would not want art to be bracketed, because who would do the bracketing? I'd be worried about, are we talking about authors? Are we talking about distributors? Are we talking about, God forbid, the state in a sort of neo-fascist sensibility that I need to protect people watching things? I think that's really problematic.
Others say there's no real threat of censorship when it comes to streaming services removing their content.
Netflix is a private company. Netflix gets to decide what is and isn't on its platform, just as Facebook and Twitter and every other platform gets to decide what's happening on there, in terms of service. And I think that that's an example of what Netflix is doing there, is simply curating its collection and deciding what and what doesn't reflect its values.
Anybody who's worried about not being able to see the content or who argue against it, they can always go and purchase it from somewhere else. So the content is never going away.
Some of the stuff that streaming services have taken down will be going back up, but with a text or video warning to help give context to when a TV show or movie was made and to acknowledge that society no longer holds those same values.
And the film's treatment of this world through a lens of nostalgia denies the horrors of slavery, as well as its legacies of racial inequality.
While not everyone thinks it's necessary, some people say it's a good but small step forward.
Much more important is any network in a position of changing public perception about any group in society is funding their shows and advancing their position in society, not just worrying about what's in their back catalogue.
I think what we need to move towards is creating Indigenous content on these subscription platforms and a focus on Indigenous creators.
But the fact that you're watching this video and we're talking about this right now, some say that's also a good thing.
What I hope happens, and I think what will happen, is we no longer look at things, at events or histories or ideas without considering that there are really complicated contexts involved. I hope that people look at it differently from now on and that they don't try to kind of repress that other side of it.
Thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to see more content just like this, then make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check out ABC Education's website for more great content for students, teachers, and parents.